Welcome to Trust Issues, only the kind that make you richer.
Welcome to Trust Issues, only the kind that make you richer. I'm Ruma Mazumdar, real estate and estate planning attorney, founder of Key Esquire, and a woman who had to rebuild herself after divorce. Today, we're talking about something I see all the time, both personally and professionally, buying a home after divorce, or maybe renting after divorce. You never know. So, for many people, the home was one of the biggest assets in a marriage, and starting over is making big financial and emotional decisions. So, let's get into some of the questions I get around this. First and foremost, I always get asked, what was it like restarting after your divorce? Truthfully, it was completely disorienting, very stressful, quite sad, obviously. I went from having a shared life, shared finances, shared future to really just asking myself, what does home even mean to me now? And love my parents. They were like, move back home. You don't need to be alone. And when I asked myself, what does home mean to you? Of course, like being with my family is like home. But I also knew that I didn't almost want to go backwards. I left home when I was 18 and I went to college in New York City and I never came back. Even after I graduated, before I went to law school, after I went to law school, I've lived on my own since I was 18. So in my mind, there was no shot that I was like moving back home at any point. And the other thing was like, I'm an adult now. Like I have the financial means to figure this out. So I'm going to figure this out. At that time, I was living in a much bigger space, and I just knew I didn't need all of that space. And of course, I wanted to get out of that space because I didn't want the reminder of my past life. So for me, it was really establishing, where would I be comfortable living? How much space would I want? I had to look at my lease to see what terms did I actually even have. And I had to talk to my management company and really renegotiate out of my lease into another place. A couple of the things that I ran into is, of course, early termination and the cost of that. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to fork over $10K for, trying to get out of a lease. So what I decided to do was I asked them to show me other units in the building, in their other buildings on the same property. And I ended up just finding like a smaller place that had enough natural light, a nook for my office, and enough space for a king size bed, my Peloton, and yeah. So I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in that same area. And for me, that was what worked at that time. I knew it was kind of like my bridge and it wasn't like the perfect unit, but what I needed to do at that time to find stability again. So that was the first place I lived after my divorce. And I knew it wasn't really about like arriving to be like the new person that I was, but more so of just having breathing room, flexibility, privacy, and space to really recalibrate before making another financial commitment. So next up, I get asked, should you buy right away or should you wait to buy? And that's a personal choice, right? If you have children, you're obviously looking to probably keep stability there, stay in the same town. And that can be hard sometimes because, what comes up on the market is not always either something you can afford or something that you like, or does anything even come up on the market when you're going through this life event. So those are some factors that you have to think about. And also, I think the biggest thing, of course, is really knowing your financial picture and also your emotional bandwidth and what your actual needs are. Renting for a year or two can give you time to really rebuild your credit, replenish your savings, and make some decisions from clarity, not just from like trying to survive. Divorce is really like a massive reset. And especially if you're trying to make these decisions while you're still going through it and you don't know what the final settlement is going to be, I think giving yourself the option to have flexibility with either a short-term rental, like 6-month rental, those are kind of the better way to go rather than just being like, I need to go and buy a property and it needs to be in this specific town, blah, blah, blah. So I think it has to come from a very personal place. I had mentioned that divorce is a financial reset. So oftentimes I get asked, what does that actually mean? So divorce really hits every corner of your finances, right? Your credit scores, like we had shared credit cards, we closed those out. We had shared bank accounts, we closed those out. We had separate savings and things like that, but we had shared money in the sense that it was, in our investment accounts, it was like, I'm going to buy these certain stock. He was going to buy these certain stock. But at the end of the day, we didn't decide to like sell and split those things, right? We just kind of like cut it as a loss and like moved on from it. So all of this, what you thought your net worth was when you were with someone versus what your net worth is once you're back to being single, it can be very different, right? So you want to make sure that you kind of go through looking at your life from the lens of like, it's no longer dual income, but, single income, and knowing exactly what your debts are. If you are going through the legal process, knowing what you're going to owe in legal fees is a big thing. I mean, attorneys are expensive. And this is really just a time to get brutally honest about your numbers. Like, you can't just put your head in the sand about it. You have to know what's coming in, or you have to know what's going out, and you have to like set a goal for yourself so that you have something to rebuild towards. And often, obviously, I tell my clients, don't buy from a place of emotion, buy from information. Even when my clients are signing a contract, I tell them, this is very black and white for me, but there are going to be days that you're frustrated, and you're allowed to be frustrated. But at the end of the day, I'm going to give you kind of my black and white legal advice. And I want you to know that I'm taking the emotion out of it so that you can make a decision from information. And then if you're starting out, right? So how can someone really figure out what they can really afford now? So you start with the boring stuff, your post-divorce budget. Factor in any sort of child support you'll be getting, any alimony that you'll be getting. Are you responsible for any attorney's fees? What is the lifestyle shift really going to look like? And the number that you think you can afford might not really match your new reality, but that's okay, right? It's not about shrinking your life, it's about right sizing it to where you are now. The goal should be peace, not pressure to keep up appearances, right? You want to be very realistic about your new responsibilities. If you have children, how are their expenses, their maintenance, support, and everything going to be taken care of? What does that leave for you? Do you have any income? What buckets do you want to split that income into? And oftentimes, and unfortunately, there are cases where obviously one spouse is the breadwinner and kind of takes care of all the financials, and then the other spouse is kind of left doing all of the quote unquote domestic things. I hate when that happens, of course, but you do see it. And I think that is like, post-divorce is a big thing where, you have to invest in some financial education, find professionals that you trust, whether it's your attorney, your accountant, a financial advisor, even friends who have an idea of how to manage assets. Talk to people so that you can understand what exactly your next step should be. And it's okay not to know. Like, even for me, talking about like finances and things like that in the South Asian culture, talking about money wasn't something that I was ever taught. I mean, most of the time it was just, swept under the rug. It was rude to talk about money. But these are things that I learned much later in life when I started earning money as an attorney. I would get calls from financial advisors. I got asked about life insurance, and I got asked about where I wanted to invest my money, and I didn't know. I was like 27 with a new job as an attorney and making more money than I had imagined, and I was like, I really actually don't know what to do with this. And it's cuz I wasn't prepared for that. So never feel like it's too late. There are so many resources out there, and you will figure it out, because I've been figuring it out. And I can't even say I'm at a point where I know everything. But I know enough to know what is important and what is stability for me. And I think that's the most important thing. So when I represent my clients, I often have, and especially if they're going through a divorce, there's usually one person that's more emotionally attached to the home. And that, of course, makes my job really difficult, especially where the spouses aren't, don't have the best relationship. One says one thing, the other one says another thing, and it's kind of going between and coming to kind of a middle. But I do realize a lot of the times it's the family home that carries a lot of memories. It's where life happened. But you really have to realize that, keeping it is probably a super emotional and financial anchor for your life. When I was going through my divorce, one of the things that and like to equate like my family home, I would say would be my dog. Um, they're unfortunately just treated like normal property, as is the home. And, my attorney said you should not be so emotionally attached to it because it could be that you don't end up getting the dog. And you may have to trade certain things that you might not want for the dog. And, she mentally prepared me to basically not see my dog as an emotional anchor. But for me and my family, I mean, we were so attached to the dog. So, like, I did everything that I could to make sure I was keeping Churro. But, those are conversations that you need to be prepared for when you're going through this process, right? I've seen people hold on to a house because it feels like it's the last piece of their old life. But do you really want to hold on to that? Can you sustain that? Because then it feels like the home really owns you. Letting go can be sad, but it can also be super freeing. And selling is also just a fresh start. You get a whole new set of funds to invest into yourself and into the new life that you're building. And of course, I always get asked, so how do you protect yourself the second time around? Well, hands down, you're definitely wiser this time around, right? So you're going to buy again and you're going to protect yourself differently. Title the home properly. Don't rush into adding someone's name unless you're legally and financially aligned. Consider talking to an estate planning attorney, definitely getting a prenup in place. But if you get married, we can always talk about a postnup. Those are becoming super popular these days. A lot of my clients have come in recently asking for one of those because they come from blended families, and they want to make sure their assets pass on to their specific children, and that their children from prior marriages are protected, not cut out, things like that. So consider a revocable trust, like I said, prenup agreements, postnup agreements, and always make sure that your estate plan reflects your new reality. Once you do get divorced, it is important to have that meeting with your estate planning attorney to let them know that you're divorced. It's important to update all of your beneficiary designations on your life insurance policies, your 401k accounts, your investment accounts, your bank accounts. So many people don't do that for so long. Something happens and it creates such a huge probate administration, legal fees sunk into just trying to get the assets to the people that you wanted them to have. Who should be a part of your support team during this process? When I was going through, I guess, the aftermath of my divorce, I really kind of went inward, and only wanted to be around family. I didn't really talk to many friends. I didn't even talk to much of my family. I talked to my parents, I talked to my sister, and I talked to maybe like one or two other people who just made me feel safe, like I wasn't being judged, and who are really truly looking out for me. So for you, you want to find those same people. And of course, professionals, right? A therapist. I think that was um, a huge thing for anyone going through this. Someone who's not just transactional, but also strategic, has worked with people that's gone through this before. Because buying post divorce is not just paperwork, it is emotional. You're making decisions about where your next chapter is going to begin. So having the right people around you is going to make the difference. And it also helps when you have like the right professionals in the real estate market too, like a realtor who is empathetic, and patient, a lender who understands your assets and where you are financially now that you are divorced. Of course, an attorney that has dealt with clients like this before and also does estate planning. So it's two in one. So it's super important to make sure that your support team is aware of your goals too, right? And so you want to be able to openly share that so you can work as a team through this process. My final sentiments on divorce is that it doesn't have to be seen as something negative. I looked at it after some time of wallowing and being sad and being crying and not speaking to anyone as kind of a fresh start, a whole new lease on life, literally, right? You get to define what exactly your life is going to look like, what your home is going to look like. You come back stronger because you have the experience from the first time. You're so much wiser, and you don't have to stay stuck in the past. Obviously, the past will inform future decisions, but look at it in a more positive way. Where I ended up, obviously, for me, it wasn't about square footage. It was more about just energy. It taught me about who is my support team. If I were to look for a home, who would I trust in that process? It helped me find my financial advisors, my financial team. It helped me really dig into my finances, know my budget, both personally and professionally, because I went from, I was early on in my entrepreneurship journey too. So it was really nice to have a spouse that was a steady, like W-2 employee where we knew there was going to be a paycheck. But there were times, after my divorce that I worried because the market can be cyclical of just, am I going to make money this month? And thankfully, that never happened. I never had to kind of, I guess, go into my savings fund or anything like that. But that fear really drove me to making sure that, I never felt like I didn't know what was going on in my financial picture. And I think that was one of the most positive things that came out of this. And then just seeing it more so as a fresh start. And figuring out your preferences, right? Like, what gives me peace? What makes me happy? What do I want to see when I walk into my home after a long day? A home isn't what you had. It's really what you're going to create next. And it's very exciting. If you're thinking about buying a home after divorce, take a breath. Ask yourself if you're truly ready, not just financially, but also emotionally. Build a team that's going to protect your interests and help you rebuild with confidence. Thanks for joining me today on today's episode of Trust Issues. If you've navigated this chapter, please leave a review and share your own advice. It helps really to know more. And if you're ready to protect your home and your future, visit me at keyesquire.com or find me on Instagram at ruma.esq. Until next time, remember, trust isn't just legal, it's personal.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.